Hi, everyone. Welcome to the digital experience team release video going over what we've done in the last iteration, which is a 2-week period. Today is August 26th, probably. And first up is Tyler.
Hello. Yeah, so lots of really good stuff going on with the big core marketing site architecture project. So we got access to provision from us for maintainer status on a new repository in the marketing org, which I was able to push up our Nuxt, like the boilerplate too. After which went through and did the Slippers UI integration, similar to the demo that I posted in Slack a while back about like how that could all get wired up. It's pretty much exactly the same. So we now have Slippers UI integrated there, and it is managed appropriately through Yarn, which is great. There's an MR for that if you want to see the diffs. I added the content module, so that gives us tools to, a lot of folks are familiar with this. I'm seeing nodding. Tools to use common conventional data structures in like conventional way in Nuxt content. It also gives us, I think, a CMS on the local development side, which is cool, like just for free. It might not be particularly useful for people outside of the team or who are not comfortable with that environment, but it might be easy for us. I set up a default layout for the pages. It's bare bones, but it includes the navigation component, and which kicked off a few iterations with Javi on just like making that component more usable on a Nuxt consumption side. So that was fun to sort of see how these things fit together like Legos. And then the big, one of the big things I did was most of the critical like header information in the head tag. We're just gonna have to sort of duplicate it, which I did for the most part. I have some outstanding questions there for folks, but the real crux of it is like coming up with a schema for how we handle like the differences between style sheet links, script tags, and then like third-party JavaScript that wants to run in the head. And there's some documentation around that as well. Big shout out to Chad. We had a great pairing session, and which pushed me forward on the CI config for it. So first we had like an initial CI config, pushed it to GitLab pages, and then fixed up a couple things on these deployments. But the big thing is like we're good. Like I put together the review app infrastructure for this repository. So when you make MRs, you'll get review apps just like you do on the middleman repository. And I'm like, I have a game plan on deployments, but I might hold off on it until we have like stuff to deploy, because there is a one-way door portion of this where at some point like stuff will start getting pulled into the production site. So I'm going to hold off on that for a little bit and talk to Barker about it before we move forward. And then I had a cleanup thing on our API retry module with like an unhandled exception before, so I cleaned that up. So yeah, it was a fun iteration. And Tina is next. I think Jess is reading for her.
Yeah, I'll read for Tina. So the first thing she has is for the homepage, she's doing this information gather to kind of figure out how to do a data-driven content block, which could mean, for example, if we know you're an enterprise person, we can show you enterprise-related content in the homepage hero, or it could be geographical, like if you're in a certain region, we show you something different than if you're in another region. So she's in the process of gathering information for that. The second thing there is they recently launched a security block on the homepage. I think you can show that one. It's live. They'll do a little shout out to Laura for the development there. If you scroll down, it's kind of in the middle of the page. And it just shows right there our various compliance badges for different things. So that's great. And then the last thing for Tina is she's also doing some information gathering for our GitLab's 10-year anniversary. I believe the original request was some sort of like data visualization. I'm not exactly sure where they are on this one, but I know she's trying to figure out what they can do. I think it's in like 3 weeks, so it's coming down the pipe pretty soon. And then for myself, the next one there, did a little adding customer logos quote above the fold. You know, it's a responsive web page, so there's not really an actual above the fold, but on the homepage, which would be kind of very similar to our enterprise pages. If you scroll into the homepage hero, you can see just a few of our main logos right under the top 2 buttons there, like Ticketmaster, Sequence, and Video, Fanatics. again, yeah, just very similar to our enterprise and just kind of calling out the big names that we work with. And next is Stephen.
Hey. So yeah, we finalized our doc issue. We have excuse me. Associated with that, we have a doc site content audit, which will help us identify the top performing pages. There was a bit of messing around I had to do with that one to get it to work and sort of decipher what pages were which, because when we were trying to do it in the original doc, the formulas would break and everything would kind of collapse and disappear. And we were also overseeing the MR, which was the text box that's going to get added to the doc site. So we were waiting on that to get finished. So that's done. There's a new issue created for Google Analytics. So we're using the top pages that are in docs, and we can identify which page we want to drive traffic to on about.gitlab. We've created a Figma epic for us to track any changes that we're doing with Figma, because it's kind of ongoing kind of block of work. And then there's a design system documentation epic 2 as well, which has sub issues in there too for all of us to contribute to. Next up is Barker.
Hey, hi. This iteration finally launched the customer reference template in Slippers. So that is live on the Slippers site. Super cool. There we go. Hey, there it is. So that deployed with 0.14.6 of Slippers. It's on NPM, and I can now transfer over building that in www. There were a couple unsuccessful attempts to solve our failed to execute post message on the DOM window. That's that error that we have on the live site that fires like thousands of times and makes it super hard to find other issues. But it didn't fix it, so oh well. We'll try again. And that was, it got kicked off by, I'm getting his name, Brian Williams. Submitted the first attempt. So thank you for doing that. And then 5 MRs to review for SEO. And so I figured I'd put those in there because it takes some time to review all those, but really helpful. Pass it over to Javier.
Thanks, Lauren. I onboarded to the docs directory repository. I don't know why I said directory. Something that I found really interesting that I didn't notice about docs is that they pull, like, the content for docs doesn't live on the actual docs repository. It lives like within their own respective repository. So it's like they're actually calling that information during build, which is where all the docs stuff gets pulled, which is really, really smart. I don't know. I wanted to specifically call that out because I think there's a future where stuff like the handbook could be functioning in that way. I had a MR with resolving style and card inconsistency. I didn't put show, but I'm just going to briefly kind of walk through like some of the things that we had talked about in the MR, because I think Tina did a really good job of like kind of calling out like what are things that were like an issues, and then like me screenshotting, and then like essentially like the whole back and forth of us like trying to get these cards to all look the same, just right now on the Slipper side. So these changes haven't been brought over to www. And yeah, I have this still left to do, the Marketo resource type form start. It's essentially like instrumentation with Google Analytics, but I'm hoping to get that out early next week. And then my 4th point, I have onboarding, and I have a small bunch of handbook fixes, like little like either things that Jess has called out in the past when she did onboarding, things that I figured were issues with our own handbook, stuff like that. I think it's like a good time to get this since I'm in there anyway. Might as well just get those fixes out. Up next is Laura.
Yeah, so first up, Tina already mentioned the homepage compliance badge section. There's still additional work to be done there, but the first MVC is up. And I updated the Slippers drop-down component that I had built previously so that it had scroll functionality. So clicking on it could scroll to a certain location, which I hadn't built out before, and that's live on the install page now. If you're on a tablet or mobile screen, a small screen. We also added the user survey pop-up on the homepage. This will show up on desktop screens or larger. Maybe you have already dismissed it.
Yeah.
Because it popped up for a split second there, but yeah, it does store in local storage whether you've dismissed it or not. So that exists. I'm not sure if we got responses yet. And then a lot of time was taken up. Jess and I have been doing these enterprise buyer interviews, talking to people internally here at GitLab who work with enterprise buyers, whether it's in sales or product or marketing, to see how they're interacting with the enterprise buyers and how we can update the enterprise page for one of our OKRs. So we've done 6 of those interviews and have a handful more upcoming in the upcoming sprint. And that's it for me. I think up next is Nathan.
Yeah, so the usual pricing page updates. We made some changes to the list of features that show up under the dropdowns for each tier. And then some experiment cleanup. So I actually forgot to, we removed the code for the experiment, but I forgot to stop the experiment on launch darkly. So I had to do that and then clean up all that stuff, which is fine. And then a lot of this sprint was actually reading. So jumping in and trying to port the enterprise page over. Obviously, like learning Vue, learning Nuxt, like all this stuff took a lot of time. And so I felt like I just read like 20 hours a week of documentation. But no, it's been good. And the migration's going well. And then just a bunch of like repo tweaks, like adding SaaS loader and figuring how Nuxt content works and making sure we're importing it properly and making things modular. So big learning sprint, we'll call it. But I think that's it for everybody.
Yeah, so I'll stop recording, but thanks everyone and we'll see you next time.